Muito bem. Estamos? Hã? Está ótimo. Boa tarde a todos. Sim, está-se a ouvir bem? Muito boa tarde, peço desculpa por este ligeiro atraso. Bem-vindos aqui ao auditório da Biblioteca da Faculdade de Ciência e Tecnologia. E uma vez que o nosso convidado é canadiano e não fala a língua portuguesa, eu vou passar para inglês. Vão ter que aturar o meu inglês. So, again, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the auditorium of the Library of Faculdade de Ciência e Tecnologia Nova de Lisboa. My name is João Freitas. I work here. I'm a teacher here at the college, and I'm generally known from the fact that I take till the very last minute to produce my PowerPoint when I'm speaking. Actually, I'm not speaking, but I think this will be the more close to the edge I've done, because I'm going to do the PowerPoint now. So this this session is named, I think, Patricia, you'll have to help me, Distance e-Learning. And then, for those of you who are brave, it has a subtitle like this, Games Without Frontiers. Oops, Frontiers. Frontiers. Okay. So, and I'm having feedback. Estás com o som? Usa. Someone has the. Qual é? É este? Did you switch off yours? Okay. Well, let's try. Let's see if it works. So this is today's session. I thought that for this. Amazing. For this session, it would be, I asked our distinguished guest, Professor Terry Anderson from the Athabasca University in Canada, which is an open university, as you probably already know. Professor Terry Anderson has been working with us on a doctoral seminar during the past 3 days, so Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Some of you here on the auditorium already have been on with us on the previous days, so this won't come to you as a surprise. But I was telling that I asked Professor Terry Anderson to have a friendly discussion, a friendly debate with some of our colleagues that have been working in ICT in education for some time now. And for this, I extended the invitation to Professor Paulo Dias from the University of Minho, up north in Portugal, in Braga, to Professor António Moreira from the University of Aveiro. Unfortunately, both of them, due to last-minute problems, couldn't be present and won't be able to participate by video conference. I also asked my dear colleague, Professor José Luís Ramos from the University of Évora. He couldn't be here due to a number of reasons, but he's with us through the amazing technology of Skype. So I'll have to ask you to be quite silent when he speaks, because it's just like when you're using Skype at home. You can't have really noise going around because it does feedback. So although, as you can see, Professor José Luís Ramos looks more like an astronaut calling from the Apollo 13, let's hope that we don't have problems and Houston won't be alarmed. But I think he's listening us, and he's also following the video stream from the internet and from the video conferencing system that we are using. So thank you, José, for such a technological ordeal. Thank you for being here with us. Can you just say something so that I'm sure that we can hear you? Can you hear us? Yes? Yes. But I can't hear you, so we'll have to look into that later. Plan B. Now, another guest, as you've already seen, and I'm sure that you all know him, is Professor Fernando Albuquerque Costa from the Institute of Education from the University of Lisbon. Thank you, Fernando, for being here in presence with us. Always a pleasure. Thank you. And last but not least, and you also know him, Professor Vítor Teodoro from the Faculdade de Ciência e Tecnologia, so he's from our institution, and he also was kind enough to accept the invitation in being here today with us. So it's a panel session, so this means that we'll start by launching a theme, which is already on the screen, and then I don't mean to minimize or diminish the role of our colleagues, and since the fact that we do not have two of them present, we have more extended time, but it was agreed upon all of us that Professor Terry Anderson, being our invited and perhaps bringing a fresh view upon these things, would have more or less twice the time we have, so something around 20-40 minutes around that, and the idea is to discuss the theme distance learning. I'll just take you 30 seconds to explain the title. I'm not sure if this happens with you, but it's for me, every time that I go to places where ICT use in education is discussed, more often than not, people use the term e-learning interchangeably with distance education, and they think, by the way that they refer to things, that e-learning is distance education on the internet. If you take the term from its etymological or for its fountain, from where it started, from at least on European terms, from the Lisbon Conference on 2000, e-learning, it was a time, I don't know if you still remember, but where the European Commission wanted to promote and to build up a very strong economy built upon knowledge. And the term e-learning started there by meaning any type of education that was being done using computers and the internet. So the word distance doesn't appear anywhere at least on the early definition. It doesn't mean that we can't make definitions our own and then redefine them as we go, but just to be sure that we're using the same terms, that's why we use something that perhaps even from some of you here on this room might look redundant, which is distance and e-learning. But for us, at least here on our home, e-learning means education with computers and the internet. It doesn't mean at a distance. And if you followed the seminar by Professor Terry Anderson, you'll see that the issue is much more complex. There are at least 4 or 5 dimensions to this terminology, but I won't dwell into that, and I'll leave you with Professor Terry Anderson, remembering our distinguished guest and Professor Terry Anderson particularly because he's not used to this, mind gap, as the Brits say. Please be aware of the fact that there's no handrail here.
Good.
Professor, thank you very much again.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Joel, and thank you for our other panelists for coming, and a big thank you to all of you to come. I'm really impressed that there are some of you who've been here all 4 days, and I want to announce that there's going to be a prize for everyone who's been here 5 days, so don't miss tomorrow. But there will also be a prize for everyone who just comes tomorrow, as well as those out in Cyberland, so I'll wet your whistles with that. What the problem was when the host does the PowerPoints in real time. That's the first time that I heard the title "Games Without Future." So I'm going to try to weave that in somehow or another. But I am going to talk about distance and e-learning. So I just have to get is it a control?
Escape.
Okay.
Should be.
It's a small computer, I'm sorry.
This is a Mediterranean computer. It takes at least 15 seconds.
Well, that's coming up. What I wanted to talk about is when you get to be as old as I have in distance education, and then something new comes along, like e-learning, which is, I will agree, is not only at a distance. It's wherever people are using electronic learning. But there's a real tendency for people to think that e-learning is completely brand new, and that it has nothing to do with classroom learning, and it doesn't have anything to do with distance learning. And of course, when you get to be as old as me, you always go around telling people, oh no, we learned all this in distance education a long time ago, and you guys have forgotten everything that's important. So what I wanted to do today was talk not so much about the technology of e-learning or any other distance education technology or classroom technology, but more talk about the pedagogies of distance learning and of e-learning. And with an idea that I'm going to go through a classification that I and John Braun developed of 3 generations, but not to suggest that any one of those 3 generations is dead and isn't happening. They were invented earlier, but they're both alive and well in classrooms and online today in all countries of the world. So I'm going to talk about the 3 generations, and I'm going to try to talk about which kind of knowledge is maybe most appropriate to each generation. And then I welcome your comments and our distinguished panelists. So in distance education anyways, it's common to think about 3 generations at least, and then it gets fuzzy after that. But people always talked about things in terms of the technology. So there was correspondence, then there was mass media, television, and then there now is the interactive media, mostly the internet. And so but the problem with that is educators shouldn't and often don't like to think in terms of technology. They want to think about teaching and learning and how the technology might be the support, but shouldn't be the focus. So as I said, John Braun and I developed these 3. We sort of crunched traditional. These are kind of coming from a psychological perspective, but we put together behaviorism and cognitivism and called it the 1st generation of pedagogy. The second being constructivist learning, and I'm sure you're familiar with both of these first 2. And you may be less familiar, but by the end I hope you are more familiar with connectivism. So the 1st generation, behaviorism or cognitive behaviorism, it really gained strength in the United States. Behavioral psychologists, and it was sort of a cowboy mentality of you tell people what to do, and then you tell them what you told them, and you just direct instruction kind of things. And it was the basis for instructional systems design, which is really big in media production and has been for a long time. But Gagnier wrote these 9 events of instruction. I'm not going to go over them all, but basically it's very clear. You gain their attention, you tell them the objectives, then you stimulate the past, but then you start talking about new stuff. You provide a little guidance, and then you test them to see whether they've learned it. So it's dead ahead, straight and clear and linear. But people started to realize fairly quickly that there was things like motivation and interest that weren't really accommodated in those earlier theories. So then the cognitive revolution started, again, mostly in the States, but also around the world. It started in 1970 or so, and we started learning about, thinking about not just a stimulus that hits your brain, but what happens within your brain. And we started thinking about chunking of different pieces of content, cognitive load, how much you can process at one time, working memory. Talked about multiple representations and whether that was good or bad to have audio and video and tactile stimulation. Split attention and variability was another one, because behavior of the 1st generation alone gets to be quite boring after a while, and we started to realize that students need stimulation, they need changes, as all of us do, and multimedia. But the kind of knowledge that behavioral cognitivism works best for is kind of declarative knowledge that it's knowledge that's fairly clear. It's a kind of a knowing of things rather than a deep application or understanding. There's some assumptions about knowledge, that it's largely context-free so that you can teach the same thing to different people in different contexts. It is capable of being transmitted. It's just sort of, I'm sending my knowledge out to you. It's a dissemination kind of model. It assumes a close relationship between the inputs and the outputs, so the kind of study and the research that was done was really trying to see what happened to this behavior after giving the stimulus of a lesson or something like that. And always learning objectives. If you went to teacher school the same time I did, everything had to have a learning objective. You just couldn't get up in the morning without thinking about what the learning objective for eating breakfast was, and it just permeated life. And there's new developments in behavioral cognitive systems. Things like reflection amplifiers, where people get, when they use machines, they can start to see how they're doing and how long it's taking them to understand this concept, and how long it's taking them in comparison to other people, or what different ways that they're approaching the learning, and the stimulus can start to change based on the intelligent responses, or the responses of the student, and then the stimulus is changed, sort of an adaptive system. So we're starting to have global indicators where e-learning systems are starting to watch how many people are online, what are they doing, how many minutes are they online in each particular module, and the news development in analytics is trying to figure out who's most likely to drop out. And if they are in danger of dropping out, then they have a whole bunch of new stimulus, new responses that they give to students who are at risk. Starting to get archives so you can look backwards at how other people solved problems, and competition and games. You see, there was games in this slide. Games they stimulate motivation and enhanced cognitive flow, as they say, and so it's very valuable. And we're starting to see this student modeling, which is, again, the machine makes a representation of who the student is, and that can change based upon their behavior and their desires. So learning analytics is a hot area. It sort of combines computer science, cognitive learning, and pedagogy, teaching and learning. And all the big, like even Facebook and YouTube, they're studying their learners. What are they doing? How can we change the system on the fly to make it better for those particular students? Or if you buy books from Amazon, you know how it always starts with it'll have Terry's bookshelf of recommendations, and it's amazing how good the books they recommend for me are, and they would be entirely different books than they recommend for you, because we have different buying habits and different browsing habits, and they're always watching it. And there's a time coming in education when students will be constantly monitored that way. And for good or bad, they will be given a different kind of a stimulus in this behavioral model. And when the thing that, at least in distance education and even in e-learning, is the sense that content is really important. So you spend a lot of money on content. You get multimedia, you get editors, you really make it fancy, and it's expensive, but you can send it around the world, so you get some economy of scale. But that is all up in the air right now because of this open educational resources. It started with by MIT in 2002 and picked up by universities around the world. And more institutions are putting their content online and allowing other people to reuse it. And that's one of the, the real open, or very significant open things, and that's what I'm going to be talking about at my talk tomorrow is open scholarship. Cognitive behavior, since you often have a team who's producing this content, e-learning really works for teams because it allows them to document what's happening, to get a flow of the creator, the authors, the editors, the copy editors. They can move that stuff automatically through the different stages of assembly, and the increases in productivity are immense. And this is just a picture of a Canadian product, but it's designed for producing e-learning content, and they're very effective if you're a training company or even an educational institution. That gives you archiving, version control, all those other things that make teams, which are an important part of cognitive behaviorist learning, work better. So, just to conclude, behavioral cognitivism, it's not dead, and e-learning and e-production has a whole bunch of ways that it's starting to enhance the effectiveness of cognitive behaviorist pedagogy. And now moving to the second generation of constructivism. Again, if you've been in education classes in the last 20 years, you've heard a lot about constructivism, and it's really probably the major philosophy in teacher schools. Whether it goes into actual primary and secondary schools, I'm not so sure. It's for sure prevalent in kindergarten, but by the time it gets up, it sort of gets watered into more behaviorism, I believe. So, what is constructivist learning, pedagogy? Just kind of stuff you're probably familiar with. The idea that you don't start afresh with a student; they have to construct new knowledge based on their understanding and the way they receive it. So it isn't so much the way the teacher says it or transmits it; it's how it's understood that's really important. And the importance of context. You can have two students from a different background or from a different grouping, even within a classroom, or a different gender, who construct knowledge completely in different and separate ways. And so the old idea that you could just present the information and the student would pick it up, constructivism says it's not that simple, folks, that you really have to take account of the social nature of the classroom or of the networked environment that the student's studying in. And they like errors and contradictions because they induce cognitive dissonance and help that construction process. Learning is not receiving information, it's processing information and making it work for you. The importance of language, and bottom one, the importance of multiple representations. So groups are really important in cognitive learning. And that's what differentiates the first generations of distance education, was it was all independent study, one student alone, working at their own pace. A lot of e-learning is still one person alone, but there's an equally large, or maybe even a larger section of e-learning, which is groups working together, cohorts. So constructivist learning is based upon group learning, and groups provide motivation, they provide feedback, and they provide conflict and alternate viewpoints. All three of them really important in constructivist learning. And do groups work? And there's been lots of study, most of it in the classroom, but also extending online, is, what happens if you put people into groups? Do they perform better? Or do they, have fights with each other, or what really happens in groups? And this is some study. It's a bit dated now, but it was a meta-analysis where they gathered all this data from hundreds and hundreds of group interventions, mostly in K-12 schools. And what's displayed here is the effect size, and those numbers may seem quite small, but they probably are talking about 10 or 15% gain in increase for all of them. They're all in the 0.6 to 0.9 of an effect size. So it is important learning. And it's easy to think, well, the students learn more, which would be achievement, the first one. But look at all the other benefits. Interperson attraction they get better at talking and working with each other, give better social support, their self-esteem rises in cooperative learning as opposed to on their own. The time they spend on task, which is always associated with higher output, increases. Their attitude improves. The quality of their reasoning goes way up because they have to argue and make it in a social context. So it's pretty clear that group learning really has advantages, maybe not all the time, but certainly should be a part of any e-learning or distance learning school. But the net and e-learning has brought a whole bunch of new tools to constructivism. First of all, there's the whole collaboration tools. You know, when I first started doing distance learning, real-time stuff, audio conferencing, video conferencing, or even asynchronous stuff, whenever you did groups, it always seemed to work for me, but everything took twice as long. It took 3 weeks to do what you would do in a face-to-face classroom in 1 week. And it's partly because people are trouble notifying each other and getting in sync with each other and being clear about expectations. But today we have things like Skype where they're talking in real time all the time in groups with video. We got notification, very powerful notification, so you can tell it, notify me when Fred has finished his work or when it's time for me to do this or that. We've got customized notifications. You can say, notify me for, you know, by text for this or by email for this or by telephone for that, and really keep things moving along. In the advances in terms of trust, in terms of being able to provide secure environments for people to explore things behind passwords or encrypted. We got decision-making and project management tools that help groups to set goals and to move forward in whatever project they're doing. And of course, synchronous meetings, I think, are critically important, and they've gone from being very expensive in video conferencing or group telephone calls. You know, it used to be really expensive. Now it's Skype. It's gone to absolutely zero. So huge advances. And we're also seeing this modeling that I talked about in the first generation applied to groups, where groups have different entities, and people can understand and watch the activities in their group. And then they can say, oh, I can see that 2 of the members haven't been doing their load and or have been doing too much, and they can adjust, and they can be more sort of an amplification reflector of what's happening at the group level as well. And visualization. This is a tool, Snap, that Patricia's using in her PhD from Australia. But you can see on the top examples, those are threaded discussions, very common in any kinds of e-learning. That's the workhorse of communication, actually. And does it have any meaning of what's happening here? Well, if you look at the top ones, you can understand who has replied. But the visualization that's presented in the bottom one, you can see the kind of star with the one person, everyone focusing around them. It's probably the teacher in this just example. But over on the left, you can see that there are 3 different dyads or groups happening on the right. Sorry. And it's a completely different dynamic of interaction that's happening in those 2 environments. And it's very easy to see on the bottom. It's almost impossible to see on the top. So you can see the power that some of these new visualization tools are bringing to constructivist learning. And gestures. Remember how important in constructivism it is to be able to talk and relate and to understand other people's perspective. Well, you can do that at a distance. You don't have to be face-to-face. You can, of course, have video conferencing, but you can even have, lower bandwidth things. This is Microsoft's Connect tool, where people are, as they move around, how they play tennis and all those games, but they can also use it for learning and by having avatars. So each of those persons is sitting down. If they stand up, they don't have to tell, like in Second Life, that you'd have to say, or give a gesture thing or tell your character to stand up. But using Connect, you just stand up, and that character will stand up for you. And this is a real favorite of mine, allowing synchronous, constructivist learning to happen, but turning it into asynchronous. So this is a voice thread, and it's a commercial Web 2.0 product. You can use it for free, or you can license it to a school. But the teacher puts anything in the middle. It can be a picture, a PowerPoint, a math problem, or whatever. And then the teacher can start with a video about why this thing is important. And and then other people can comment and add their own interpretations. And this isn't in real time, it's asynchronous. So, and over a week or a month or over 2 semesters, the discussion can build up around these objects. And you can do it by audio, by video, or by text. You can take whichever you feel most comfortable or whichever bandwidth you have. Unfortunately, it's not an open source tool that you can download on your own host, but I'm hoping somebody will do a knockoff on it and make it available, because I think it's a really powerful tool. So that's voice threads. But there's a problem with groups. And it's illustrated by there's a lot of sheep-like behavior that happens in groups, a lot of groupthink, where people, they don't want to say things that are going to be embarrassing, even if the other person is dead wrong, or, we have social conventions about how to work in groups. And in education groups, school groups, and it's different, as we learned last night with Hofstade's look at different cultures, but the way the shepherd is treated in groups is quite completely different. And sometimes the presence of the teacher in a group really inhibits the interaction. People are afraid, or there's a big power differential. And not only in education, in business as well, with when certain people with their dominant personalities or whatever, or their authority of their office, are in a classroom. They're usually isolated from the world of practice, especially as we get into lifelong learning applications. People come to a class which is quite different than anything they do in the rest of their lives. And I think the biggest problem with groups is they give people an idea that the only way they can learn things is if they go to a class, and that they have to, sit in front of a teacher or online with a teacher. And there's just so many other ways to learn that for lifelong learning, we have to teach students to learn on their own. We have to give them the opportunity to learn with other people and with teachers. But we have to, have all 3 of those so that they can really be prepared for lifelong learning. And the other one you see in e-learning was a colleague of mine talked about pathological politeness. In the early days of e-learning, there was all this talk about flaming and people being really nasty to each other and bullying each other. But then when in formal education, it never happened. Everyone was always very polite to each other. And they were sometimes so polite that he termed it pathologically polite. They just wouldn't engage with each other. They wouldn't be honest with each other, and they wouldn't really do the kind of discussion that constructivism and debate that constructivism really thrives on, which is why we develop learning activities like debates that formally give the person the right to be aggressive, and to be impolite at times, or to at least be aggressive. Okay, so constructivism in groups, I think it's good, and there's lots of new tools coming out to support it in an e-learning environment. And then moving now to the newest one, connectivism. I define it as learning is building networks of information, contacts, and resources that are applied to real problems. So you can see that learning isn't like behaviorism of having something transmitted from your head into my head. And it isn't something that you develop through a group perspective, but it's sort of an emergent property that gives you capacity to do different things. It's developing networks, and the networks are people, but they're also of things, and they're of resources, and they're of institutions, and you use those things to solve real problems as you will. And the term was coined by George Siemens, a colleague of mine from Athabasca, and he's got sort of 6 tenets that he developed in 2004, and he hasn't really changed them very much. There are articles saying that what's problematic with some of them, and maybe the most controversial one is the second one that says learning may reside in non-humans. And again, it makes you wonder, it depends what is the definition of learning. You could say information resides in non-humans, but can learning actually happen in the machine? And then how does it become useful for you? And it's only, George would say, in your connections to that machine that you can, that learning happens. And he talks about nurturing and maintaining connections and ability to see these connections. in being currency, to being up to date and accurate, so that knowledge is accruing in real time in a networked era that we're in. It really speaks to the need for rapid change in all areas of our lives. Unfortunately, connectivist knowledge is a little bit hard to pin down sometimes. It's distributed because your network isn't just people who are in your family or in your house, but they're distributed all over the world. It's often chaotic. They'll have different people have different ideas, and they might be in the same network, but they might have disagreements, but they may never have to sit down in a constructivist environment and really hash it out. They might just have these conflicting ideas. And you have to be able to use conflicting ideas and apply them even when maybe rationally they don't make sense in your current way of thinking, but you have to be able to decide what is chaotic or what is real and who is it real for and all those sorts of things. Fragmented, non-sequential, and contextualized by what the application that you're using that knowledge for. This is a great quote from Ronald Burt, an American psychologist, and he wrote a lot about social capital, about the capacity to get things done. And he says people who live in the intersection of social worlds are at a higher risk of having good ideas. And that's exactly what happens on the internet. It brings people into contact who never would hear each other's ideas or thoughts. And the people who are most attuned to these different and divergent cultures are always having good ideas thrown at them, and sometimes they're able to connect with those and bring them into their own personal network or into their group or into their family or whatever. Constructivist knowledge is emerging. It's kind of lots of uncertainty and lack of predictability. But you can argue that emergence is really critical when you're talking about novel and creative solutions to problems. And if we've ever had a more need for creative solutions to some of the problems that we face globally than today. There's a little bit of work happening already, but lots to do, and say, okay, so this is what connectivism is supposed to be about, but how do we use it in formal education for teaching and learning? And so some people have talked about, a sort of an instructional design or an early one, where the first step on the left is awareness. You have to be on the net, you have to make connections, you have to see different networks so that you understand what you don't understand, and you can, sort of be exposed to a lot of different cultural and social and cognitive things happening around and information. And then you have to be able to filter it, because there's so much stuff coming at people all the time that we need to filter. We need tools to filter, we need to have brains that can filter, and we need to have networks of people who can filter for us so that people are telling us what's important or what they think is important, and then helping us to move along. Connectivism always talks about building artifacts, creating things, whether they're essays or projects or diagrams, and publishing them, putting them on the net. It's very cheap to do, and it's an open world, and connectivists are always creating gigantic footprints on the net. They're becoming net visible, and they're making an identity for themselves. And so one of our challenges for students is to help them to have a net presence that they're proud of and that they contribute to. There is a special issue just started a couple of weeks ago on connectivism in the journal that I edit, and George Siemens and Gani Kanol edited it. And I hope that you'll all subscribe. It's a free subscription and publishes about 4 or 5 issues a year. I've already talked about awareness and the footprints that we leave. Also, Stuart Kaufman has always talked about adjacent possibilities, and that's a really nice term in English anyways, to see what's happening in the worlds outside of your normal world. The things, and every time you learn, you expand to a new network, that exposes you to more new networks. And this kind of constant exposure becomes really fruitful for learning. I am getting to the end. I know I'm talking on and on here. Networks of practice as opposed to communities of practice. You know, Etienne Wagner was really big on what a community of practice is and how powerful it is for social learning. But this takes it a little bit further to talk about a network. And networks have some things in common with groups, but they're much more fluid, much larger, and more organic. And so a teacher who's been trained to teach and lead in a group often has great difficulty leading and learning in a network because the skills required of teachers are quite different. There are also problems when you try to implement connectivism in classrooms, especially maybe with young children. Privacy issues, control issues, who owns the material? Does the teacher own it? Do the students? Do they have a right to put everything out online? What if their parents don't want them to have their stuff online? And it's very disruptive of behaviorist thinking especially. And so it can cause conflicts within school organizations or within families. How do you support it? They use so many different tools, Web 2.0 tools especially, and computer services people get very frustrated with, they want to have one set of tools, Moodle or Blackboard. They don't want to have teachers using 20 different kinds of tools all the time. And how can you sustain motivation and commitment, because it can become overwhelming. So, third generation connectivist pedagogy, right now it's challenging to implement. It's more early adopter, pioneer kind of thing. It is disruptive, but I would argue that it's lots of fun for students and for teachers, and it does match a lot of the big think tanks about what are the learning goals for the 21st century. They really fit well with connectivism. So how do you decide which of these to use and when to use them? Just very briefly, going to end this talk by talking about Bloom's taxonomy. You know, 1956. It just never dies. Bloom's come along, and he's taught about 40 years ago. He's still being taught about in schools. And it starts, you know, with knowledge, going to comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. And the idea is that students should be progressing linearly up that hierarchical pattern. And it's been updated in 2001 by Anderson and Crackwell, and they changed the sense, the verb from knowledge into a verb of remembering, and so made it more active. But it's basically the same through the bottom layers, analysis to analyzing. But they switched the top two. And they put on the top creating as opposed to just evaluating. And it's sort of the same as synthesis, but it's broader as well. And I mean, this was done in 2001. And that really reflects with connectivism, because connectivism really is important to have creating as being, you know, the end goal or the visible reflection of learning. So if you, wrong way. So this is really rough, and they tend to spill a little bit of overlap with each other. But you see, understanding and remembering is first-generation cognitive behaviorism. That's where it really works well. Constructivist is applying, analyzing, and certainly a portion of evaluating. And I've had people argue with me that constructivism is also about creating. So these are rough terms. But connectivism is really about creating, evaluating, filtering, and analyzing the truth of things for oneself. So you take an old paradigm and you can apply these three things, and I think they fit relatively well anyways. Just to end off, first generation is hard to do. It's hard because it's very structured. And when you get those structures built, you can run them like a mass production system, and people understand what's required of them, and it reduces choice, but it is scalable. You can have thousands and hundreds of thousands of students like the large open universities in the developing world have. Second generation is much softer, fuzzier, and it doesn't scale. It's hard to think of running a constructivist e-learning class with more than 30 students. 30 seems to be the limit. I know that some institutions push it above that, but I haven't seen it done really successfully with much more than 30. So it doesn't really scale very well. And third, connectivist is emergent and it's soft. It is scalable, but it forces more learner control. And some of our learners are not prepared for connectivist learning, and they need to be helped along and scaffolded. So in a way, what is soft, like connectivism, is actually hard to do, and but soft is the real world that we're entering into. Lots of choice for students and for instructors. So to conclude, all of these behaviors, cognitive models are useful for memory and concept development. Constructivist models develop group skills. Connectivists introduce network learning, and they're foundational for lifelong learning in complex contexts. We need all three of them. And don't get into arguing about which one is best or what's quality, because they have different ideas about what is a quality behaviorist course compared to a quality connectivist course. So rather, try your hand and make sure your students get exposed to all three, but don't get into big arguments with people about which is the best. And I did an expanded set of these for a conference I did a couple of months ago in Sydney. And so you're welcome to have a look at them. So I hope I haven't taken too much time, Joel.
Thank you.
And I will turn it over to our guests.
Thank you, Professor. Yes, okay. Don't fall. So now I would ask Professor Fernando Albuquerque Costa to make his contribution. Not sure, tens PowerPoint? Tens? Está aqui?
Suposto de mim.
Cuidado com o porrador.
Por aqui umas grandes.
Cá tivemos um pequeno problema e o gajo foi-se abaixo. Está no ambiente de trabalho, não sabes? Painel RCT Distance Learning. É este, não é?
Exato.
Muito bem. Não te esqueças quando saís daqui, sai para este lado. Eu quero que os teus netos continuem a tirar um porreiro.
Well, good afternoon. First of all, I must say that it's a pleasure to me to be here and to profit your talk, your lecture. It was indeed a great lecture. When João invited me, I thought, what can I do in this panel? I have a lot of possibilities, and I decided to share with you and with the attendants a project which I am in this moment coordinating about this subject. It's a distance learning project, but more than what I could say, I decided to profit of your presence here and ask yourself about some concerns, some questions, some doubts I have now within this project. This is a project about, or better, a project for itinerant children and adolescents in Portugal. It is a project designed mainly to answer to some problems, some needs of those students that go away with parents and which mainly are showmen and circus artists and workers. And this project was designed by the Ministry of Education of Portugal 5 years ago, mostly to give an alternative to those children and adolescents. Otherwise, they have no possibility, at least in a regular and normal way to attend the school. So this is the project, this is the context. What we have as target group, we have children aged 10, 17 years old, from grades 5 to 12, with, I can say, a very unstable life or context of life, and they attend already the school in the past, but with high dropout and failure rates. Most of them are also with very irregular attendance of the school. So they try to be inside the system, but after some time the probability was to drop out. So the goals of this, the main goals of this project is first to give the possibility to these students to conclude at least the compulsory education. And as we are in a context of electronic context, also to give them a possibility to prepare them to the digital age. The strategy, the main strategy can be defined. How can I say? As a shift or a accommodation or a specification of the way that the curriculum was defined, and as well the strategies of instruction, and also the ways the students are assessed. So the idea is, because they are a very particularly target group, the main idea was to como é que se diz, falta-me o termo, to adapt to the specific context of these students and to those specific interests and learning needs. So we can say that the project in general comprises the subjects of the regular Portuguese national curriculum, but with the introduction of two innovative approaches. The first one is seeing the curriculum as a way that the subject areas are connected, at least in some of them, and also give a great role to the action that teachers could be in some periods of time dedicated to the tutoring activities. And now, Terry, the questions. I organized the questions, maybe you can help us. The first one around the age of the students. And the main question is, can we use the same kind of knowledge we already have about what is distance learning, mainly thought to adult people? Can we think and can we apply this kind of knowledge also to these young people? in your opinion, or it's another thing, another problem, another kind of that we must research and thinking about? There are any possibility, in your view, of to guarantee a stable, regular and effective learning process using this kind of technologies we have now, and you very well shown in your talk? Or do you know other projects that around the world we can use to help us to deal with this group and this main goal, to help them to learn and to finish the compulsory school? Second one is more focused on the specificity of the group. Can we, given the instability of their lives, can we, what can we do to focus or to bring students to the learning activities? Because as you easily can think, the rate of attendance is not always good. It changes, for instance, if there are fair or there are activities, circus, and so on. And another question, because yes, we already have decided about the curriculum and new metrics, curricular metrics, but what do you think? It's possible to have the same requirements in this case, in this context, that we have, for instance, to evaluate students with the same criteria of the regular students? Or this is another thing, another challenge? Yes. The third word is about instructional materials. Okay, it's a knowledge that is important to have materials, and the materials could be a great help to students, at least when they learn by themselves. But what kinds of materials and learning resources, in your opinion, fit better the learning needs of these students? Can we talk in the open strategy here, or it's more secure to still have the traditional way of doing this kind of materials? And the question that is makes this não é desafio, é repto, a challenge. Terry, can we assume here, at least, I don't talk about a connectivist approach, but can we at least assume here a constructivist approach to the design and construction of the materials, or even in the project as a whole, to help and to give the classes to these students? And the last one, about it's a question very important in my opinion. How can, I know that it's a teacher training question, maybe, but which kind of competencies and skills must we focus on teacher education to help these teachers to get the scenario that you have described before, because we are in a distance learning context, we use electronic learning technologies. And the last question, it's just a question to help them teaching online. It's a question of being, to be a good online teacher, or it's another thing, or more things. So this is my very small participation is a kind of challenge, but it's also a problem, and it's important to talk about problems and profit the opportunity when we have such person like you and your knowledge to help us to better work. We have just for today, not for today, for yesterday, but we can profit today the address, the first address of the blog where we have this information, for now just in Portuguese, but it's also an invitation to other colleagues to know better what happens and what are our idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando.
Não vou por ali, vou por aqui. É tudo, desculpa.
Thank you very much, Fernando. And stepped up edition from the previous one. And so we are now trying o nosso rapaz do trapézio do voador. Our José Luís, that just say one or two words just to see if sound is coming in properly. Hopefully. No, too low. Fernando, não te importas de... Aí está o... Vê lá se está fechado. Aí é desse lado, é isso. Não, fala lá, Zé Luís. Não. Vê, isso tem uma coisinha aí, uma rodinha ao lado do coisa. Não, do outro lado. Aí mesmo encostada à banana. Há bocado estava a falar, Zé Luís, provavelmente deves ter cortado o som no próprio Skype, porque há bocado estavas a falar bem e agora não se está a ouvir nada. Yeah. No, I think he commuted the sound so that not to allow feedback, and now he's not. Experimenta no Skype, está a funcionar? Está no máximo? Então para aí um bocadinho, deixa-me ver. Zoe, estás-me a ouvir a mim? Por favor, fala com a cabeça, se não te importas. Diz que sim com a cabeça ou não com a cabeça. Estás a ouvir? Eu não te estou a ouvir, pura e simplesmente, nada. E ele está-me a ouvir a mim? Está. Deixa-me ver se eu consigo. Isso está bem, qualquer coisa que ninguém já viste para o Skype. Já está no Skype. E com as minhas desculpas aos presentes, é desse lado, acho eu. Tentar perceber o que é que se passa.
bocado lento. É? Muito lento, é? É de propósito para as visitas? Esperemos que não. Desculpem lá, é rápido. Espero eu. Digas que tem de ligar o meu. Prometo que não tenho PowerPoints. Também não tenho presas. Tenho uma coisa muito mais simples. Ora, um bloco de notas. Ok. Vê-se bloco de notas ou não? Vê-se bem ao fundo? It's ok? Não? Very low tech. Okay. So, very low tech. Only one slide. And I knew that Terry will give an excellent overview of all the issues in distant learning. So, I decided to make a very small thing and a short contribution about my experience as teaching a course online. Since 2004, I've been involved in the master in using informatics in education of the Catholic University. And on the first course in 2004-2006, there were about 120 students, then about 60, and the last course, it was about 30 or so. And I was in charge of one curricular subject for 3 months more. So, if someone asked me, in half a page, write what you have learned and can share with colleagues that plan to do some work, either research or just teaching normally, a course using online at a distance, that's the subject of our workshop here, of our seminar here. So, what you will write? So, I didn't choose a number, I just chose everything I could find it will be relevant for another colleague in a similar situation, and I will just focus on a few points. The first thing I will say is plan everything in advance. It's completely different from teaching a normal course. If you don't have it planned, you can be surprised, and in this case, I will say usually surprises are not a good thing. And can you list the less number of critical factors that decides the success of the course? Well, the less number are just 4 factors: engagement, create a sense of engagement, plan feedback, the quality of materials, that's very, very important, and also, what about personal and group interaction? It's not just about reading and making tests. So that's the 4 critical factors. And this is also very important. Planning is not, as good teachers know, planning is not the opposite of being creative. A low variation, a low possibility to do other things, but if you don't have the plan in mind, things can get very complicated. Another thing that I found very relevant is you must have a week's schedule, even for the teacher. Probably that's the most part of the schedule. Particularly if you have lots of things to do simultaneously. Have a week schedule is something that is very, very important. my channel. But you will take about 1 hour seeing a movie, and that must be explicit from the beginning and clear to students. Something that I'm not very good at because people have I've been same time in a course managed by a group of universities, Oxford, Stanford, and I think Harvard. They probably you know. Some years ago, they created an online environment for giving extension courses. People all over the world, you know. Then they closed the business because they were not. At the same time, I was following a course, and one thing that I assume as probably depend on the type of course. Planned. Even orçamento, how do you say, the budget for and they felt very, very power. A teacher center for all the things. There are two last things that I would like to share with you. Is something that you show there are lots of classes show. You must teach and learn explicitly. I will not give a course now here, but there are lots of techniques to do that. And if we look at the history of science, the history of writing, you will learn that Pedro Nunes, for example, wrote his books on the work of others. At the time, writing a book was getting a previous book and rewriting, adding things. Probably that will be the future of academia, I don't know, but is now, that's much better than just copying and paste or using the automatic Google Translator. Because in certain cases, if you use the automatic Google Translator, that can happen to you what happened to me some years ago, and I will say that in Portuguese. O Windows, não sei o que, no original estava Windows, e a tradução era o janelas permite fazer não sei o quê. E o janelas estava traduzido automaticamente e, portanto, o aluno apresentava o trabalho com os janelas. Finally, the advanced search skills. I found that in a good online course, the distance, you need to have good search skills. It's amazing how people think that it's just put something on Google, and refining search It's absolutely essential for learning online. And that's not easy, and that's also something that must be done with assessment of the quality of the information. It's amazing how people accept everything that appears on the web. The best case I know is a student, a former student from here, that after his PhD in education, the oaks of the Amazonia forest in Brazil. If you don't know the oaks, you must look. So it's an example of advanced search skills. You can look for Amazonia forest, oaks, and then you can refine, and you will find one wonderful story how if you don't have advanced search skills and you are learning about something, particularly without supervision, you can learn the most crazy things. And this guy has made a doctorate in education in this faculty, and he sent to all of his mailing list something are doing to Brazil. Please go and try to find it. If you don't find it, I will help you. But it's a good example how you can be misled by the internet.
Ok. Boa tarde a todos. Good afternoon to everybody. I'm trying to make a little intervention. I have no feedback at all about what is happening now in the room. Please, João, give me some feedback using the Skype chat. Are you hearing me? Posso então iniciar a minha breve intervenção? Estão a ouvir-me, João? Sim. Okay. So, first of all, I would like to compliment my colleagues in the panel and also the audience. I would like also to congratulate the Learning Lab of the Nova University for this initiative and also for sharing this opportunity with the academic community in the country. I know it's a big challenge, but it is an initiative that is very important for us at the moment. As you know, most of the public universities in Portugal, they are involved in setting up e-learning systems under the so-called contract of trust signed by the Minister of Science. So all this initiative is a very interesting opportunity for us. I would like to thank to Terry Anderson for all these days of learning I could have in most interesting issues. This is a kind of gold opportunity for me, and I will thank you for all the learning I got. I wouldn't feel like a specialist because my limited experience in e-learning issues, I never taught in the formal and distance education course. So I just can talk a little bit from my own experience as a teacher in a conventional university. My exam is quite modest. I have been a pro-rector for e-learning issues in my university for several years. In this task, I try to organize and set up a distance learning system for the University of Edinburgh. And what I can say about is that is a very difficult issue for all the people who are involved. We now have some start. We have some teachers that are already ready for working in distance learning, and we have also a learning platform. Most of the teachers use the platform to support conventional learning, and we have reinitiated all the process last year, and now we are now making our own way. We are preparing the first distance learning course next year. The teachers in university, some of the teachers are involved in the preparation courses with the Portuguese Open University. So in institutional terms, I would say that we are starting dealing with this kind of issues. The teachers, all the students are teachers already. They belong to different curriculum areas: arts, mathematics, biology, physics, and concerns. I would like to share some of my own concerns. Trying to think about what Terry was speaking in the last days about online learning, connectivism, constructivism, and so on. So my main concerns about what I am doing as a teacher in working with my students are three aspects. First is autonomy. They have to make very high effort to get the job done. Also about collaborative learning, working in groups, it has been quite difficult for me and for students, especially using a convention.
Não, eu estava a fazer. Ai, acabou-se do crédito. Okay, so we have now not because that's appropriate because José was posing two and I think he
My university.
you have to connect yours. I'm going to ask him what are the two questions, and then I'll repeat them for the room. But perhaps what we have more or less some 20 minutes. So I propose that we ask the room, the auditorium, if anyone wants to pose a question. Patricia over there with the red shirt has a hand mic. So if anyone of you would like to comment or add, we are targeting the session to end more or less 17 minutes. So if you wish to make a small comment there, this would be the time. And the microphone lady is over there. So anyway, take some time. I also asked our colleagues that are following the huge audience of the internet that's following all over the world this session, if they wish to submit some questions or comments, please do. Our Skype username is UIED Skype, and it's published on the web pages of Seminar, so most of people should know. And we also have António Maneiro that's coming in from the video conferencing environment from the city of Austin in Texas, and he could also be interesting. I'm not sure if he's interested in submitting some questions, but he's also now on the floor. So while you're still thinking on all the numerous questions you're going to submit, and remember, just give me just 1 second, because I already have the first question from the person.
Não, eu só fazer pergunta da
in your university, have dealt with these kinds of problems. One that he mentioned, he was facing the technology on his own courses. So that's one question. I think he'll probably have another one. But since we're waiting for Professor Delmidade, I'll give the floor to Pedro from the Institute of Education University of Lisbon, Dr. Students.
Okay. Terry, you said it's not the first time that I hear this from you, but you said that synchronism is very important in distant learning. So why do you appeal, or you are a fan of synchronism?
Sure.
Question.
Yeah, that's a good question. The problem with synchronous in general is that it gets confused with full video and full audio, and especially when you talk about things like VoiceFed, where you have full video and full audio and real intonation, but it's not synchronous, then you can start to think how important is synchronous. But generally, it's between just text and asynchronously and full video real time. And so I guess most of the things that I really appreciate about synchronous are combinations of voice and expression and things like that. They're just confounded with synchronous. They're not necessarily synchronous. But synchronous in itself, where I really like it, is it establishes the pace. We heard the recommendation for a weekly pace, and sometimes, you know, it alerts people that things are happening now, and it allows for sort of a commitment to the now and a way to get excited about coming to it. And of course then it becomes more spontaneous, because people, you know, they don't get a chance to reflect and think of the perfect question. They just say what's on their mind, and I think that can be very useful. And finally, when you have an end of the class party, to try to do them asynchronously doesn't work very well at all. So that's a good question.
Other questions? Yes, great. Please, please state your name and institution.
I'm also a student from a master in the distance. Professor Martin was one of the teachers the last
Here?
Yeah.
and when you talk about I remember the work that I
Made it.
2 years ago.
Where I to other people to answer if or how can promote cooperative learning.
pulse on cooperative learning, and where we are trying to understand how can Twitter can promote cooperative learning. My question is it possible that Liverpool can promote cooperative learning communities and cooperative learning networks? The other issue is in Twitter I've asked about Twitter and the synchronous tool that it can be, and I have got 3 answers. One of them was from Josimos. I would love to read one line, but I'm not professional time. The other one is from another person that said that I think it's synchronous, even though it could operate really quickly, whatever it will be. And an answer from a teacher, I think, she said she uses 100% Twitter as a synchronous support tool, and it works fine. Another person that I don't know says that it is synchronous because timeline changes quickly, not good thing for synchronous, and no mystery also. Second, search by hashtags, save a small amount of tweets. The question is, how can we use Twitter for online e-learning, distance e-learning?
Well, it's an interesting question because you see technologies like Twitter that are sort of synchronous and sort of asynchronous, and it gets hard to put everything into a box these days. But so I think you just have to look at each one as best you can. And what I think Twitter does best is it gives a sense of immediacy to alert students that these things are happening now, to get them motivated and engaged. And so, because it's very easy to just go away and not think about your education, because everyone has so many other things to worry about in their life. But the Twitter coming in and short and inspiring, and I think it has a place, but it's 140 characters too short for me, mostly. So I use it a little bit, but not a lot.
Okay. Any other questions from the room? From the floor? No?
Can I have a question?
Because there is a question for himself.
No, not for myself. Well, first to comment on the advice that you gave. It's amazing to me how similar the experiences of all of us, and I'm very grateful for you to exemplify and talk about them the way you did. I wondered if you thought that the Be Organized, I think, was your first one or second one, whether that will sort of go away as we all become more familiar. Like, there's so many things we do in a classroom that we just have learned how to do over the years that allows more spontaneity and more emergent kind of a stuff. Or is there something about the remoteness that demands a kind of organization, a heightened organization?
I think is more a kind of, if you are not trained enough, you need to be more organized.
And none of us are trained very well.
At least that's my case.
Yeah,
I was not trained enough for preparing that type of course, so no experience enough.
Yeah.
So, for example, the course I give here for 22 years,
yeah,
I can be completely unorganized because I know even the numerical solutions of the problems. So that's different. But in this case, you need, the organized can be, but I frequently am organized to say to students, take an hour to solve this. And the same in this type of e-learning distant courses. You will take an hour to see this movie and to write a short comment. If they don't know they will take an hour, they think they will take 5 minutes or 3 hours or complete Saturday. So
because they are inexperienced.
Being more specific helps students and instructors take more advantage of time, or even find a quarter of an hour to think creatively. If not, things will come like that painting. You see? A complete mess. And that happens a lot because people don't think they will take, for example, reading. How long it takes to read something? 1 hour, 10 minutes? What are you expecting me? How long are you expecting me to read this? And if you are organized and say, okay, this will take, let's say, 2 hours plus another 2 hours. And here, for our normal courses, we must make a plan for all type of work that students, probably in the Canada also, education, you know the ECTS system, European Credit Transfer System. When we prepare a course,
must meet these objectives or be
not
clear.
only objectives, for each activity you need to make a prediction of how many hours students will, we call it student work. So you need to be specific. How many hours students will work on, let's say, assignments, on the examinations, on reading, on, if you look for a course all over Europe now, they must specify. And a student work 28 hours is one ECTS. So this is a measure of student work, is what they call it. So this at a distant course seems to be even more important because people think, oh, I can do it anytime. That's not fair.
Thank you.
I don't know what to say more, but there are probably a question present here. And you talk about it's the need of a different culture. You said open culture. I think the question José Luís is about that. At least in Portugal, we work at a very very old institution, very old university. It's very difficult to shift if even we want just to make a small shift. For instance, I start thinking and concerning about e-learning 10 years ago. In my university, just now we are starting to doing something on e-learning projects. In my institution, the Institute of Education, it was in this year that beginnings the first master course with this kind of solution. Do you see the time we need to this kind of shifts? I think.
Well, if I could comment on the time, I guess one observation would be to say first that people thought the Soviet Union would never change either, and things happened very quickly. And it isn't just an old traditional university. My university is only 40 years old, and it came, to answer José's question too, we have some of the same problems, but we were founded as an open university and as a distance education to begin with. But we were founded before the internet and before e-learning. And getting us to change is probably, as well, maybe not quite as hard as the University of Lisbon, but it's not easy either, because we have a tradition that we try to build up, or habits, if nothing else, that we really get defensive and not want to change. So I appreciate the problem that we all have. I guess unfortunately, at least in Canada and the United States, the private universities are coming on and are becoming very competitive. And they brag, 60, 70,000 students, and they say, we can change our curriculum in 1 month, and bang, It's very autocratic and top-down, and it isn't what universities have been about. But I think we're going to have to be more flexible in order to meet those kind of challenges, or we may be in trouble. Can I ask you a question, Fernando? I was very interested in your project with the itinerant peoples, because distance education has been used for special needs people like that, or prisoners, and in Canada we have special needs of the Aboriginal, the native peoples, and some of the thinking now is that we have to sort of have not a national curriculum, but a cultural curriculum for that group. And I wonder, in your group, are most of them Roma, Gypsy people? And
not Gypsy. Not Gypsy.
Oh, okay.
Not at all.
Ah, okay.
Not at all.
Because it used to be, and I induced the professor in there.
Okay. Not at all.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Because they have also another cultural configuration.
Ah, okay.
But these people, they have also
A culture themselves, don't they?
themselves.
Yeah. I just wonder whether to think of some ways to sort of acknowledge or even celebrate that kind of lifestyle and make it special, so that they figure that there's a place for that culture in higher informal education. Their parents probably didn't do a lot of school, and they haven't, and so it's kind of to try to break the tradition without just saying it's terrible or you're dropouts. And I think that's a challenge, and it might be useful to try to celebrate them.
I see you said the correct term. It's a question of style. They have, because I don't explain a lot about the project, but and it was a question related with the age of the students. For instance, when we talk about distance learning, we are thinking about adult education, isn't it? But can we transfer directly the knowledge we have to this kind of students? For instance, the first decision we had, it was to have a schedule, diary and week's schedule, like in the regular class school, you see?
Yeah.
Because the representation, the perception students have about school is to get a schedule, to have the first subject and the mathematics following, and so on and so on. And that it's important for them. But the question is the instability of their lives. They are not present every time. So how can the first decision when I take the coordination of this project was like another project in Portugal that is for me very amazing, is to give a mobile phone to each teacher. So when you have not the students present on the platform, we use Moodle and chats, and the teachers call the student, or even to the parents. And you see? It's a very old strategy to get them to
get involved. Yeah.
Okay. So, any other questions, comments? So I think it's time for and being heard throughout cyberspace. Yes.
Can I just a small question? Do you have data about the costs of the distance education versus formal education?
Yeah, yeah.
In your case, in your university,
Yeah.
final cost is the same as the university?
No, ours is quite a bit lower. Yeah. Almost all the old distance education units are.
Same, for example, for open university?
Yeah, yeah. It is quite a bit lower, yeah.
Half, a quarter?
About 55%, 60% of the cost. Yeah. And the more interaction you have, the higher the cost. So if your e-learning is lots of synchronous, it might not be very much different in total cost. It's interesting, though, because I talked the first night about the big issues in distance education, and this panelists, they had talked to people around the world saying, what are the most important issues? And the cost efficiency was high on all the experts. And then they look in the literature, and there's hardly anything published because people don't want to talk about it, or they're not allowed to talk about it. And they hide costs, or they don't talk about dropout, or some of those things. So it's a huge research issue and I think that there's so many different kinds of distance education. Some are very cheap and have high dropouts. Some are very expensive and don't have high dropouts. So some have high student costs and low institution costs. So as does face-to-face, it has high student costs too.
The Open University, that's a good example.
Yeah.
Out of a normal.
Yeah. But they have, and to get that economy of scale, you need to have, I think they have 120,000 students. The larger you get, the cheaper the cost.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, José Luís. Thank you. We're on time, and so we can't really go further more on this conversation. But I'm sure that if you kind enough to be here tomorrow for the last session of the seminar by Professor Terry Anderson, we'll be more than glad to hear you and perhaps even answer your doubts and your concerns. Tomorrow's conference will be Open Scholarship from Open Educational Resources to Open Publication and Open Research. It will start at the same time, so 6 o'clock. And it will be broadcasted to the internet, but please do come. It's very, very enjoyable to have everyone here in the room, and even people from Austin, Texas, people from Évora, Portugal, like José Luís, who is still with us following this session, and even António Reis from Madrid, which connected by me to the conference today. So thank you very much. You didn't really have an answer to the issue of distance learning, but perhaps even better so. I think everyone has to find within themselves the correct and adequate answer to where technology fits, where does learning begins, and if we do it with sensibility, thinking on our students, technology should come as an aid, either if it's distance or if it's presence, either if it's called distance learning or learning or whatever you want to call it, it's learning, and it will happen. Thank you very much. I'll see you tomorrow.